things that you will need to make this ice cream are, you will need a big storage gallon-sized Ziploc bag, a smaller sandwich or quart-sized Ziploc bag, milk of your choice. You will need ice. I'm using enough from a standard tray. You need salt. I'm using just regular salt because that's the only thing that I have in my house, and likely you guys too, and it works. But it's better if you have like ice cream rock salt, which is, you can also buy in the store, and it's in a big box like this. Some vanilla, some just plain white sugar, and then anything that you guys want to use to flavor or decorate your ice cream when it's finished, you'll need that also. So you're gonna start things off by washing your hands because you don't want to ingest all of the wonderful germs that are on your hands at this moment. So go do that. And after you're done washing hands, which is the only lab safety that we need to follow today, you don't have to wear goggles or anything like that because this is all very, very safe. Safe to ingest for once. And probably a good thing that you can do it in the comfort of your own kitchen for that reason. So I'm going to start things off by opening up my smaller bag, and we are going to put in 1 cup of milk. And if you want to use like chocolate milk or something like that, or like dairy-free milk, it should work, whatever you choose. So I've got my 1 cup of milk here, and then I'm going to put in 2.5 tablespoons of sugar. I think this is pretty sugary, so I wouldn't go with more. If you don't like your ice cream very sugary, you can go with less. So I've, again, 2.5 tablespoons. I'm using a half, so I've got to do it 5 times. And then after you do your sugar, you're going to put in your vanilla, okay? And you're only going to want a little bit of vanilla because it can be kind of overpowering. I'm going to put in half a teaspoon. If you're going for just plain vanilla ice cream, half a teaspoon is really all you need, but you can add a little more, but I wouldn't add more than 1. And technically that's really, at this point, all that you need to make your ice cream. I like to go through and add a little bit of cocoa powder because I like chocolate ice cream more than vanilla. So you are more than welcome to add something that is flavorful at this time, like some sort of chocolate syrup, some sort of like strawberry syrup or something like that, anything that would like flavor the ice cream. Don't add toppings right now, okay? Do not add like M&Ms or sprinkles or anything like that. You're gonna wanna add those at the end. That's kind of why you're lucky that you get to do it at home, because I wouldn't have all this fun stuff that you have in your kitchen that you could make your ice cream with. That might be too much cocoa powder, I don't know, we'll see. I've never actually gotten to do it before. Okay. What you're going to want to do is seal this very tightly, but you also want to remove as much air as possible from the bag, okay? So seal it tightly, but as you can see right here, like this is as flat as I can get it, okay? Now I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna mix this up. Ooh, this chocolate's not working as well as I thought it would. That'll work. Okay, so once you've got this all mixed up, and again, you have it sealed very, very, very tightly with as much of the air removed as possible, you're going to go through and put it into your large Ziploc bag. and then you're going to add your ice. Okay, now I'm going to pause this. Sorry, I knew that was going to be really loud getting all that ice out. So mine looks like this, and I'm going to tell you that's nowhere near as much ice as I would normally use in the classroom where we have access to an ice machine. So if you have 2 ice trays, I'd go with 2, and if you have an ice maker, more power to you. Then we're going to go through and we're going to add 1/4 cup of salt, which is a lot of salt, especially when you're not using the rock salt. So I might even use slightly less than 1/4 cup. Because it's small, so it's filling in all of those gaps that you would normally have. And I'm going to add that right into my larger bag. So I've got my small sealed bag in here. I've got my larger bag with the smaller bag inside, and ice and salt. Make sure you seal it really good. And then prepare your hands. Preferably by wearing some gloves, because you're about to shake and flip this bag for the next 10 minutes, something like that. And I don't know if you've ever held ice for 10 minutes, but it's not particularly pleasant. So I've got my gloves here. I'm going to put them on, no shame and comfort. And then you're going to just take your bag and you're going to move it around, okay? So I like to go through and just go by the corners. You can sit and shake it. The idea is that you want everything to be constantly moving within the bag, okay? And while you're doing this, why don't you think about the chemistry a little bit, okay? So, you thought you were going to get away with just ice cream, right? So I want you to think about, why is it that when we add salt to our ice, does it help us to make this ice cream? What's the point in adding all of this salt? Because you might be thinking to yourself, well, Miss Potter, earlier in the year we talked about adding salt to ice, but it had the opposite effect. Whenever you add salt to roads in the winter, that's supposed to keep it from freezing. But doesn't this salt help the ice cream freeze? So think about that. I'm going to go ahead and stop this and continue mine for the next, several minutes. Like I said, 10, 15 minutes. It might take you a little bit, okay? Alright, so I just finished shaking my bag. It honestly didn't take me as long as I thought that it would, maybe 5 minutes tops. But before we get to the end of this video, I wanted to finish off talking about our science, because of course that's why we're here, right? So I asked you, why does adding the salt to the ice help us to make the ice cream freeze? When in comparison to when we put it on roads in the winter, when it has the opposite effect. And the answer to that is that it has to do with when you're adding the salt, okay? Now, we talked about colligative properties, and one of those colligative properties was freezing point lowering, right? But we also talked about heating and melting curves for water. Goes from ice to water vapor, right? And we also know that freezing in the opposite direction is a process known as melting, okay? So freezing and melting kind of happen at the same temperature. So if you have freezing point depression, you also have melting point depression by adding some sort of compound in there. So whenever you're talking about salt on the roads in the winter, you're trying to get that freezing point depression. You're trying to make the water freeze at a lower temperature so it takes longer for it to freeze. But when we add it to ice that's already there, we're trying to lower its melting point. We're trying to keep it as cold as we can for as long as possible, because we know the second that we take that ice out of the freezer, it's going to start to melt because it's gaining that energy as heat from the environment, from the atmosphere, because it's hot out. And even still, we don't live in freezers typically. You'll also remember that whenever we had those heating and melting curves, you have those flat lines, right? you have those areas where you're putting energy in, putting energy in, putting energy in, but the temperature isn't going up, right? And that's when it starts to melt. So if we can take the melting point of our water from 0 degrees down to, I mean, sometimes you can get like -20 degrees with salty ice. So let's say we get it down to -15. If my ice now melts at -15 degrees, you might think, well, Miss Potter, doesn't that mean it's going to melt faster? No, because melting takes a long time, right? So yeah, it is going to go through and it is going to melt the ice, but that melted ice is 15 degrees colder than it normally would have been at 0 degrees, okay? So that's how this ice and salt works in our favor in this scenario. So, what I'm gonna do now is I'm just going to get my smaller bag out of my big bag, and I'm going to take this big bag, and I am not going to put it down the drain. Okay, we've had this talk before. Why is it not a good idea to put very, very, very salty ice down my drain? Because it's going to freeze my pipes, okay? So I am just going to dump this outside in the grass because we don't have to worry about that freezing in the summer. And so now I've got my smaller bag that has been untouched by the salt, and I am just gonna open it up. You can eat it right out of the bag, but I don't like to touch it for very long because it is covered in that salty water. And I'm just going to spoon it out into a bowl. You'll notice the texture is not perfect, right? Like it's not a pint of Ben & Jerry's. But if you're in a pinch, like let's say you have a craving for ice cream at 1 a.m. in the middle of the summer, but all the stores still have limited hours from quarantine, you just can't go get any, this is for you. So I've got it in my bowl, and this is when you want to go through and add any extra like toppings that you want. So I the other night made some like edible, safe to eat, no eggs, heat treated flour cookie dough, and cut it into little pieces, and so I'm just gonna add that into my ice cream. You can add sprinkles, you can add chocolate chips, you can add syrups, whatever. Mix it all together. Take a bite. And enjoy your ice cream, guys. You worked hard for it. You had to think really hard about salt. You had to work really hard by moving it around if it was really cold and you didn't have gloves, you know? This is the kind of science that I think we can all get behind. So, I hope you guys continue to be safe this summer. And as some of you guys go back to school at new schools and universities, and some of you guys come back home to St. Albans in whatever format we might be coming back to, I know things are really uncertain and scary right now, but at least you can always make ice cream in the comfort of your own home, and that's something that no one can take away from you. So have a good summer, check for Remind, and I'll hopefully see you guys sooner rather than later. Bye.